Despite losing to Oregon in the Big Ten championship, I have never had more confidence in this Penn State football team than before. This is a national title contender.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Seyko. I'm your host of the show, and help me welcome him back, the artist now behind Triple Threat Tyler. That is Matty Fresh over on the other side. Go check out his newest song. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can keep the action going with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, let us know your thoughts down in the comments section. Is this Penn State team a legitimate national title contender? But Matty, they can't win the big game. They can't beat elite teams. They're gonna lose to maybe they beat SMU, maybe they beat Boise State. But if it's Georgia, Notre Dame, if they happen to face Oregon or Ohio State, there's no way they beat them. Penn State showed me actually quite a bit, because my biggest concerns about this team were the offensive line, the ground game, the wide receivers, and against an Oregon defense, especially that Penn State offensive line going up against the likes of Mateo Uiagalelei, Jordan Burch, Harmon in the middle, and Penn State's offensive line never looked better. I really think this team, it also helps that they play SMU and potentially Boise State if and when they win, but this path being favorable and the way that they match up with these teams, they're going to learn from their mistakes, and they should be considered one of the heavy favorites to win the championship this season.
Yeah, Zach, thanks for having me back. So it's been a cool weekend. Obviously, the one downside of the weekend was not getting the win over Oregon. Now, I know I was here last Tuesday, right? And I don't know if the Oregon fans have stuck around. I know that they paid a lot of attention to your shows last week. I think you may have had more Oregon fans watching last week than you did Penn State fans. And I don't know if any of you are still hanging around. I will say I was wrong about Dillon Gabriel. Dillon Gabriel is a gamer. He changed that entire game. He was the better quarterback in the first half. You could say he was the better quarterback the whole game, even though Drew turned it on in the fourth quarter there. His inability and refusal to take a sack pretty much lost Penn State that game. It got Tom Allen out of his game plan defensively. Obviously, Gabriel hung in the pocket and just delivered dime after dime. He fell on his own fumble. That would have been a huge swing play. Gabriel did all right, and I was also wrong about the third quarter. Penn State did not, in fact, have an advantage in the third quarter like I suspected they might. However, I will give you that, Oregon fans. All credit to you. I was wrong there. But there was one thing I was right about. Oregon can't stop the run. They didn't stop it against Boise State. They didn't stop it against Ohio State. And they sure as hell didn't stop it against Penn State, right? I don't know what Oregon is going to do if they can't stop the run in this playoff, because they're going to get the winner of Ohio State and Tennessee, the Buckeyes who have Judkins and Henderson, and Tennessee who has Dylan Sampson, who's one of the leading rushers in the country. The pass defense is great, right? They can rush the passer, and they're good in the secondary. That run defense is not impressive. They just aren't. We neutralized those defenders with Uiagalelei and Burch. They were non-factors in the game. Penn State took too long to get into the run. But when they were in the run, they were unstoppable.
I think that is something that Penn State proves. So is that more of Penn State figured out a strength here, or that Oregon is just weak when it comes to defending the run?
No, it's a strength for Penn State. Don't get me wrong. Okay. It is, absolutely. But I think it's a little suspect of Oregon as well. I think a lot of teams, especially Ohio State and Tennessee, were watching it pretty closely at Penn State run film and what we were able to do. And obviously Nolan Rucci, man, did he step up and have an incredible game. Drew
on an island.
Was phenomenal.
On an island.
Dawkins, I mean, these guys were phenomenal. And I think, if you're Ohio State and Tennessee, you don't want to look too far ahead, but you're thinking we might have a shot running the ball against this team after what Penn State did. Now, there's obviously, I know we've already flushed Oregon, but to me, there's a couple reasons you lose that game. Obviously, to get the 6th seed, right? You lose on no, I think, you're watching the game unfold in the first quarter and you're thinking Andy Kotelnicki has just taken too long to get into the run. And Penn State's first 20 plays, which are scripted, 16 of them were pass plays, Zach.
They're also playing from behind. You want to talk about script. There's a game script that dictated Penn State's game plan, because if they had the lead, they would have kept running and running and running. But at one point, they were down by 18, and that's why I've really, my confidence level has changed about Penn State. A loss does not define this team. They are going to learn and make the adjustments. And looking at the game plan against Tez Johnson, Zion Tracy and Cam Miller did not work. If they get in that situation again, they know that they can move A.J. Harris around to at least neutralize that. And that's my point about the path. SMU, Boise State, even when they get to Indiana, Notre Dame, and Georgia, any one of those options, are those favorable matchups? No, but they aren't mismatches. Penn State actually matches up evenly with those teams and let the chips fall where they may. Texas, Ohio State, Oregon, I mean, those teams are all going to have to fight each other, and they're all going to knock each other out. And they were close against Ohio State. They were close against Oregon. People might think otherwise and say, "Oh, well, Penn State just can't win the big game." It came down to just a couple of plays, and maybe if the calls from the referees had been a little more, instead of one-sided, I'm not saying that it was rigged or biased or anything, but say the game was called evenly or Oregon had committed a few more penalties like Penn State did. This game's completely different. They were one-score games against elite teams. Penn State has shown me, like I said, my biggest criticisms were the ground game, the offensive line, what can the wide receivers do? And you got enough from the wide receivers. You got that classic game, that 1-2 punch of Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. Drew Allar was able to avoid the pressure, but he really wasn't under duress a lot against Oregon. Again, that tells me everything I need to know. And then the defense will figure it out, because that was still a top 10 defense. Oregon happens to also be a top 5 offense. So it is not a surprise that Oregon is going to put up a lot of points. I think that Penn State can figure it out. Tom Allen's a veteran of the game. They have Abdul Carter, Zane Durant, Denai Dennis Sutton, Kobe King, Tony Rojas, Zach Wheatley, Jalen Reed. These are all quality veteran college football players. They're going to figure it out. That's one game, not a condemnation of the entire team. They can make mistakes in one game and learn from them.
Yeah, and you think about big-time football games, and what goes around always usually comes back around. If you watched Penn State, Ohio State, the reason Penn State can't complain about losing that game to the Buckeyes is because Will Howard fumbled the ball into the end zone for a touchback. I mean, if you can't win once you catch a break like that, you can't complain. However, in this Oregon game, you just kept waiting for that break. And you saw
never had one.
Gabriel fumble and he just falls on it. You saw missed linemen downfield on touchdowns. You saw some missed holding calls. You saw a missed late hit on Drew where he got body slammed to the ground. You saw a catch that was ruled incomplete from Amari Evans in the middle of the play. And you just were like, when are we going to catch one break? Penn State literally had to earn everything in that game. Nothing was given to them. And then you're sitting there on Selection Sunday and you're worn out from the Oregon game because you didn't catch a single break. You were begging for just something to fall into your lap. Even the Zion Tracy play, like 30-yard punt return, he gets called back. So you're just waiting on Selection Sunday thinking, can we catch a damn break? And the College Football Playoff Committee gives Penn State fans exactly what they needed, a much-needed sigh of relief, because you get SMU, who you'll be a 9-point favorite against. You get Boise, who you'll be a 12-point favorite against if you end up playing them. And this is a team under James Franklin in the last 3 years that has not lost as a favorite. So I think there's a bigger gap than people are seeing here, Zach, in the 5 and 6 seed. I think we know Clemson now is better than SMU, and we know Arizona State is better than Boise State. So even looking farther, I know it's a 1-0 mentality, but I would even venture to say the Oregon-Ohio State winner is better than Georgia. And that's Oregon or Ohio State is not a team you'll have to see until a potential national championship. So without getting too far ahead of ourselves, when we're talking about national championship contenders, Penn State's in a great chance to reach the semifinals.
They're in a great spot.
And I think the reality of the situation is if they win as a 9-point favorite and they win as a 12-point favorite, they will go farther than one of the teams that they lost to in the regular season. Is that fair? There's an argument on both sides, right? The 6th seed ended up being the Golden Goose this year. It's just the way the chips fell. And now Penn State must capitalize on this opportunity.
Also, another reason which I have pointed out is that there are no distractions here. Andy Kotelnicki is staying. He is not going to West Virginia. He's returning for at least the 2025 season, but that is a big deal in itself and why it impacts this team for the 2024 postseason. We're going to talk about it more on the other side of this break. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. You can keep the action going with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet just $5. $5 is all it takes, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get that hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more. And it's all on the same page where you place your bets. It's that convenient. It's that simple. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. And if you look over at FanDuel.com, you can see the lines for, yes, Penn State versus SMU, the first round of the college football playoff. Home game for Penn State. If you didn't know already, Penn State is an 8.5-point favorite. The total is set at 53.5. If you like those lines, you can bet them over at FanDuel.com. And remember, you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, let's jump right back into the conversation, Matty, and talk about Andy Kotelnicki. The impact is huge, not only for 2025, of course. Both sides. And I want to begin with what's right in front of us in the present, the 2024 postseason run. I was prepared for what started to trend in a negative direction for Penn State. That Andy Kotelnicki and Rich Rodriguez were really battling for this. And it turns out that it seemed like West Virginia did in fact want to hire Kotelnicki. They were prepared to offer him the job, get a pay raise, become a head coach. But obviously not everything materialized. There were certainly concerns that Kotelnicki had. West Virginia wanted him to coach right now, lead the program right now. And he said, I want to do the ethical thing and lead Penn State through the postseason as far as they go. Well, now there's not that dual loyalty, if you will. He can focus on the playoff and nothing else, developing the game plan. He doesn't have to worry about interviewing. He doesn't have to worry about a coaching competition, out interviewing, if you will, Rich Rodriguez or Jeff Monken or anybody else that has come into the fold here for West Virginia. All of his attention, all of his focus is on a Penn State postseason run. And that is better for the Nittany Lions. And I got to imagine there's adrenaline rush for the team now that they get their offensive coordinator back that they've all rallied behind. This went from a top 50 offense to a top 10 offense in one offseason.
Yeah, not saying that Kotelnicki never considered the West Virginia job. I think he highly did. But
he interviewed for it multiple times, right?
and obviously that's something that his agent is saying, take the interview, man. Like you have to because your name's going to get out there. And you know, we hear Coach Franklin's name come up. His agent is doing what his agent has to do. And I think Coach Kotelnicki's agent is probably making sure that he sits down and takes those interviews. I think the writing was kind of on the wall when Andrew Olish had flipped from Michigan to Penn State.
That's a good point.
I think he wants to play in this offense, and I don't think he would do that without a guarantee that Kotelnicki was going to be the guy running the show. And, you know, you look at it and you think about offensive coordinators, usually better if you wait 2 years. It worked that way with Joe Moorhead. He had his 2 full seasons under Coach Franklin. And
Manny Diaz.
Yeah, well, with Manny Diaz, too, he was a head coach. So I think he was more open to just taking the next head coaching opportunity where if you don't have that prior background as a head coach like Moorhead and Kotelnicki, you know, obviously Moorhead was at Fordham, but like a Division
FCS,
1A. Yeah. So, you know, with Kotelnicki, it's more of a waiting game, I think, because he is an offensive coordinator at heart, right? And with Manny Diaz, we knew he was a head coach at heart, and I think that's
he showed he could run a program. Yeah. We don't know how Kotelnicki will do running a program. And again, for what it's worth, hey, West Virginia, solid brand. I will give them that. Power 4, Big 12 conference, right? In this day and age, it wasn't a step backwards, definitely, right? Not a group of 5 school, someone that you would have to really dig out of the mud. Like, if you get the resources, I feel like because of who Andy Kotelnicki is, and then you combined West Virginia's brand, I feel like the two could have worked out. So I think West Virginia missed out on an opportunity, but hey, they didn't fight for him. They didn't want him that badly enough, and I think they're going to pay for it long term.
Yeah, absolutely. And I saw that narrative as well from some West Virginia fans. Like, yeah, I don't know if they have their eyes on Rich Rod or maybe some of these other candidates. I saw Oregon's offensive coordinator was being thrown around in the mix now, and obviously that's a big time name. But yeah, I think Coach Kotelnicki coming back is kind of some history going back to Coach Moorhead, how big that offense was in 2017, and then Joe Moorhead ended up with the Mississippi State job in the SEC. So if Coach K wants to be a head coach someday, and I'm sure he will, he's probably got his eyes on a little bit bigger of a prize than West Virginia.
Which is crazy.
Good brand, decent conference. But I think if you're an up-and-coming coordinator right now, you want to make sure you're in the Big Ten or the SEC. I think that's kind of the way that things have been falling lately.
And Kotelnicki is not only going to help Penn State for a 2024 postseason run, this instantly makes Penn State a 2025 national title contender as well, because so many dominoes will now fall into place. You get Kotelnicki back, which will knock the domino over of Drew Allar strongly considering a return. I have heard, and this is not an official report, but Drew is considering a return. Let's just put it that way. Drew is considering a return. Whether he's leaning the NFL or one way or another, it is going to strongly impact his decision now that Kotelnicki is back, because why would Allar, who has improved his draft stock, has gone leaps and bounds and made his game so much better under Kotelnicki, why would you take a gamble, a risk, unless for whatever reason, in a different planet, different world, universe, where Ty Howell happens to be an in-house promotion? Maybe. But if I'm Allar and there's a third offensive coordinator in my college career, that doesn't help him. That doesn't benefit him. Now it actually benefits him to come back to Penn State for another season, and then it benefits the team. And then that's the next domino. And then top wide receivers in the transfer portal, they want to play in this kind of offense. That's another domino. So Penn State, Andy Kotelnicki sets a huge precedent to where it leads to Penn State being back in this position where they should be considered a favorite for next year's college football championship.
Yeah, I said this before with Drew, and I'll say it again. Obviously, we'd love to have him back, but I think the Oregon game was the beginning of the end for his career at Penn State. I kind of figured that he was going to have a massive run here, and it started with the Oregon game, and it will continue in the college football playoff. He's going to play his best football, and I think he's going to end up a top 10 pick. Now, I think where it becomes important with Kotelnicki coming back, I think we get one of the two running backs back. And I don't know if, sitting here last year at the same time, I would have said the same thing. I would have said, push all your chips in for 24 because you're going to lose Drew, you're going to lose Nick and Katron. But I think we can, with Kotelnicki and the way this run game is and the way the two running backs play at the same time in this offense, I mean, hell, you might get both back if you're really lucky. I think Singleton probably still goes, but I would look at Katron Allen and say I would make a huge pitch if I was Andy Kotelnicki and James Franklin to say, dude, we're coming back. You could be one of the best running backs in college football. I'll give it one more year.
Certainly NIL can factor in too, because the days of, I will say, everything will take care of itself offensively now. I don't think you need to fight as strongly for Drew Allar, Nicholas Singleton, and Katron Allen. That's a good point, but I think it all takes care of itself. Where NIL is important is because a guy like a denied Dennis Sutton, maybe not necessarily that first-round pick or that fringe first-round pick that I would have evaluated him as, that I did evaluate him as in the preseason. He's kind of like a Adisa Isaac, where he has a lot of potential but still has to prove more, which probably puts him in the third or fourth round. That's going to get you what? I don't know the actual NFL metrics, but that doesn't get you the $1 million contract and the guarantees that a first-round pick does. You're going to get hundreds of thousands and not millions, so that's where NIL can help maybe retain a Kobe King, a denied Dennis Sutton, a Zane Durant, all guys that can go off to a Jalen Reed, KJ Winston. That's where NIL needs to be strategically used, because the offense isn't the issue. It's trying to build the defense back up so that they can be that bona fide national title contender.
Yeah, my last point on Kotelnicki, you wonder if, these athletic directors and these presidents and these people on these hiring committees and other schools, how much are they looking at Coach K and saying it was all Tyler Warren? Because James Franklin made a comment in a press conference last year when he was asked about what he looks at when hiring coordinators. And he said that after Mike Yurcich, he had to reevaluate how he hires coordinators. And one of the things that he looked at was, do you have a generational player that has carried you through your tenure at that specific school? We know as Penn State fans that the answer is no. Tyler Warren did not carry Kotelnicki through his tenure this year. I think Kotelnicki put Tyler Warren in the best position to succeed. Do other people around the country know that? Or are they just looking at Warren, this generational talent, right? Yeah. And saying, when he's gone next year, is this guy just going to be Mike Yurcich all over again? We know the answer is no. Do these hiring committees at other schools factor that in at all? That might be the reason he has to stay one more year.
I'm glad you mentioned Tyler Warren because he was snubbed from the Heisman invite. He is not going to the ceremony in New York, and I've already said it. I want to get your thoughts on it. Some of it has to do with the song, but Triple Threat Tyler is not invited to New York, and that was just wrong by the voters. We'll talk about it next after a word from our sponsors. And today's show is also brought to you by Omaha Steaks. Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. It's guaranteed perfection in every single bite, and right now you can save on unforgettable gifts with 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, score an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. With 5 generations of experience, they constantly deliver the world's best steak experience. And the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages featuring gourmet favorites. From legendary steaks to mouth-watering desserts and more, save 50% off site-wide for a limited time at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com and an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. Minimum purchase may apply. Again, that is omahasteaks.com. Tyler Warren not invited to New York City. Voters got it massively wrong, and I'll tell you why. When I look at the quarterbacks that are invited, and it's not to disrespect Dylan Gabriel and Cam Ward, had good seasons. Completion percentage, passing yards. They quarterback their teams very well, and Miami didn't make the playoff, but Oregon is the number one team, and it helps when you have a veteran quarterback like Dylan Gabriel. But Matty, when I look back at the quarterbacks that have won the Heisman, Lamar Jackson, Tim Tebow, Johnny Manziel, those guys played a different caliber of ball game. And Dylan Gabriel and Cam Ward are not comparable to any of those players. Ashton Genty is correct. He is getting ready. He is on the cusp of breaking Barry Sanders' record. He deserves an invite. Travis Hunter, I get all the memes, I get all the jokes, but the dude is good at 2 positions, not just 1, 2. Wide receiver 1 was a top 10 receiver in terms of total yards. He helped make that offense go at Colorado and was cornerback number 1 for Colorado as well. But in that same breath, Tyler Warren was playing tight end, wide receiver, sometimes Penn State's leading rusher, quarterback, snapped the football against USC. I don't see any other tight ends doing that. I don't see any other players except for except for Travis Hunter doing multiple things in a given game, playing outside of the box. So Tyler Warren, and then Bryson Daly got screwed by not getting invited. The quarterback for Army, 29 rushing touchdowns. Are you kidding me? That is the same amount as Ashton Genty, and he doesn't get an invite. Take out Cam Ward and Dylan Gabriel and add in Tyler Warren and Bryson Daly, and you got the top 4 players in the entire country.
Yeah, I should keep my mouth shut about Gabriel. That didn't work out well for me last week.
He's a good quarterback, but he's not a Heisman. He is not a Heisman.
I won't go there, but yeah, speaking of Omaha Steaks, the Heisman committee deserves to be grilled for this decision. I mean, does Shedeur Sanders have a song about Travis Hunter that I missed? I know he's got some raps out there, but you got to have a campaign.
I like your music better. I'll take your music any day.
Song. You can't, you got to have a campaign behind it. And Tyler Warren had a better campaign than any of these guys, I guess, outside of Travis Hunter. I know there was a lot of pub around him. But no, for me, it comes down to one of 2 things. It depends what school of thought that you go with. There's one school of thought that I think is the majority of people that talk about the Heisman, which is it does not matter what your record was. It doesn't matter what the success of the team was. It should go to the most valuable player in college football. And that's why Caleb Williams won it last year, even though USC was 7-5. Like, I think that is the school of thought that a lot of people live in. I'm on the other side of the fence. My school of thought is that if you're not a top 5 team, you don't belong in the Heisman Trophy ceremony. I think maybe I would extend that to top 10 for someone like Ashton Jeanty, right?
Yeah.
If Boise State's still a top 10 team. There's no chance that Colorado, who is not participating in their conference championship game, should get a player invited to New York. There's no chance that Cam Ward should be invited just based on volume of pass attempts that they dropped back and threw it 80 times. There were moments where Cam Ward lost Miami games this season. So, yeah, I don't like Ward being there. I think, Hunter is very polarizing, and obviously he was going to end up there. But, yeah, Tyler Warren was completely snubbed out of this. This is a tight end who went over 1,000 yards receiving on Saturday night. He has 10 total touchdowns. I think if you add the passing touchdown in, you could even add it to 11. And there was nobody more impactful in all of college football this season. Was he a byproduct of changes that were made in this offense? Of course he was. I'm sure he wouldn't have had the same numbers he did under Yursic's system. But, it doesn't – you can't really hold that against him because that's the same thing with Cam Ward. Cam Ward doesn't put up the numbers he does without Miami dropping back 70 times a game. Ashton Jeanty doesn't get the numbers he does without Boise State running the ball 40 times a game. So all these
volume
schools,
helps.
That's another thing I would say. Every school that we're talking about here, definitely Colorado, absolutely Boise State, and for sure Miami. I'll leave Oregon out. Definitely pushed for this Heisman, knowing that they probably didn't have a shot at a national title. Penn State didn't, at the end of the day, push for Tyler. They pushed on social media. I'm talking about in-game action. They weren't throwing touchdown. In fact, Tyler Warren fell down against Minnesota and did the smart thing at the end of the game instead of walking in for an extra touchdown to pad his stats. You have to factor that in as well. Did the team force the ball to these guys? I mean, we saw Travis Hunter catching touchdown passes up 56-14 in games to lock this Heisman in. In no world did Penn State have Tyler Warren in 8 or 9 games where they were blowing the competition away. He was on the sideline. So I think that should matter. And it's an absolute snub for Tyler Warren not to be in New York. And call me biased, but I'm okay with that.
It's when I look at it, Travis Hunter impacts the game plan at Colorado. I feel like you can put another quarterback at Miami and honestly Oregon too, and still get similar types of success. I don't. Ashton Jeanty, look, the way that he's ever, maybe you look at the level of competition and that's why you can point to, that's why he's successful. But when I think of Tyler Warren and even Bryson Daly, I want to give Bryson Daly some credit too, but Tyler Warren, Penn State's offense is not as good, not as efficient, not as effective without Tyler Warren. Defenses didn't game plan holistically for Trey Wallace. They definitely respected Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. But when I look at it, defensive coordinators had to stay up late at night to try to factor in Tyler Warren. And he made Penn State's offense go and help bail them out at times. USC, of course, kept them involved in the game against Oregon. And even though he didn't have the biggest day against an Ohio State, his clutch catches down the stretch at least put them in a position to tie the game, potentially win it.
Yeah, and I'll say it again. I think allowing Caleb Williams to win the Heisman on a 7-5 team last year changed everything.
Sets a bad precedent.
Yeah, exactly. It's never this way. How many people complained when Mark Ingram won the Heisman? Well, it's because he was Alabama's running back, right? Like you said, he could have put any running back in an Alabama jersey. That year, they were winning the Heisman because they were the number 1 team and on their way to a national championship. Now, going forward, this award is going to be a lot of 3, 4, 5 lost teams. And to me, it's like you have to make a difference to win games. If Travis Hunter was so good, why didn't Colorado beat Kansas State? Why didn't Colorado beat Kansas? Tyler Warren won games for Penn State in moments. You could really point to the Minnesota game. Allar scrambling around for his dear life. And he
USC.
finds Tyler Warren. Yeah.
USC. He saved the
USC,
season against USC. Yep.
Time after time. We should have won the Ohio State game because of Tyler Warren. And that's one of the travesties of Penn State football history, that he didn't get the ball. Had he got the ball there and had a signature moment, leaping over the line to score and beat Ohio State, he's probably there. It's probably there.
Well, that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions, covering a lot. Let us know your thoughts about Penn State being a title contender this season and next season, Andy Kotelnicki's overall impact, and should Tyler Warren have been invited to New York City. He is Matty Fresh, the author of Triple Threat Tyler, now available wherever you get your music. Links for his work will be down in the description. Matt, thanks so much for the time again, as always. I appreciate any time we get to talk about Penn State football.
Appreciate you having me, Zach. And quick thought on SMU. Don't be fooled by that top 5 run defense. Nobody runs against them. They throw it against them all the time.
That's a good point. We're definitely going to talk about it more as the game gets closer.